Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Bitcoin News Show right here on the World Crypto Network. We have an amazing show for you guys today, ladies and gentlemen. We have some of the smartest minds out there in finance right here, ready to talk to you guys about some of the biggest news out there, I think, for Bitcoin, really almost for the whole year. You can really count this as some of the biggest news for Bitcoin in the whole year. We're going to be talking, of course, about the CME futures market and their announcement to launch a futures market for Bitcoin. And we have again, like I said, guys, some of the smartest people here. So let me go ahead and introduce them now. We have Mr. Simon Dixon, the co-founder of Bank to the Future. Simon, how you doing?
Very good, thank you. Thanks for having me again.
Awesome, man. Thanks for joining us. We got Andy Hoffman, the proprietor of CryptoGoldCentral.com, the sound money blog of the 21st century. Andy, how you doing?
Thrilled to be here.
Awesome, man. Thanks for joining us. We got Valentine Schmidt, the business editor of the Epoch Times. Valentine, how are you?
Good, Jeff. Thanks a lot for having me.
Awesome, man. Glad to have you back. And finally, we have our surprise guest, ladies and gentlemen, here. The father of Jack Mallers, the creator of the Zap wallet, of course. We have to introduce him as that. Mr. Bill Mallers, Jr., retired now, but was the president of the first American Discount Corp, which was a big, huge futures brokerage market in Chicago. Bill, how you doing?
Great, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so, man. Appreciate it so much for joining us. And thank you to Jack, of course, for the invite, for suggesting you to come on. I'm really excited to hear about your insights. So we're actually going to go right into, actually, I have a couple announcements first, guys, before we get into the main subject of tonight. And really, we only have that one topic, so we got a little bit of time here. But I just wanted to make a few announcements before we get into it. And the first announcement is that both Coinbase and BTCC have clarified their stance just recently, in recent days, that the BTC ticker is going to remain the Bitcoin that we have now, and B2X will be the ticker for SegWit2X, which of course effectively makes it an altcoin. Now, they don't have native replay protection, but as we've seen, Coinbase and all of these wallets and services and exchanges, they're all going to implement their own custom replay protection so they can protect their customers, so they can allow their customers to go ahead and split their coins. So that's just great news, to make sure that, Bitcoin stays Bitcoin. So really awesome news. And then I also wanted to just address a small thing that I've noticed going around the Twitter sphere here. I've noticed that a few prominent Bitcoin CEOs have been trying to push the narrative forward that the user-activated soft fork was actually being developed and pushed by Core. Now, we know this to be not true. This is completely false. I want to just disparage this narrative right now, because the user activated soft fork was not created by Core. It's not in the Core repo, nothing like that. This was a user activated soft fork. This was a user led grassroots movement that really forced the hand of the NYA. So remember, this was not from Core. Most of the Core developers actually were against it. So I just wanted to get that out of there. And I think we can go ahead and start with the show, guys. So with those announcements aside, let's go ahead and start with Bill first. So let me ask you, Bill, this is some of the biggest Bitcoin news of the year, in my opinion. So let me ask you first, can you give me your thoughts on what you think of this news, what you first thought of when you heard this news? And then the main question is, do you think that this will begin to centralize Bitcoin too much to allow for large manipulation and corruption of Bitcoin, similar to what we've seen in the gold markets and things like that? And I'll let you go. Go ahead, Bill.
Absolutely not. No, when any of the gold market manipulation that takes place on East Coast firms, and Chicago prides itself on protecting the integrity of our products. We know we have to do that. And when you think about it, think about it. How does Chicago have the most successful stock index future? Why isn't that in London or New York? Interest rate futures. Because we really do. We have a dedication to the same principles that got you into Bitcoin. Transparency, opportunity, and we don't care what your last name is or what your pedigree is. Bring your talent, bring your integrity. You can make a living in Chicago. That's really the same things that get you into Bitcoin, right? I think CME and Bitcoin is a perfect match, and hopefully I'm going to convince your audience to keep an open mind about CME's efforts to trade this contract.
Awesome. So let me just then ask you then, what did you think about this, Bill? Because I understand that you've been in Bitcoin since 2013, and so what are your thoughts as a Bitcoiner on this news? What did you first think of or thought of when you heard this news?
Yeah, what I first think of, flashback. Where'd you get your first Bitcoin? Did you write a personal check at a local Bitcoin meetup, or God forbid, Mount Gox, which had none of the values of the Chicago. It was sketchy. You gotta take a deep breath when you were trying to infect your friends with your Bitcoin enthusiasm, 4 or 5 years ago. And hopefully, a couple that's not going to be the case. A reputable and transparent contract is going to be listed on the world's biggest futures exchange. I think it's going to be a big help for encouraging adoption and access.
Awesome. Very cool. So thank you so much, Bill, for that. Let's go ahead and move on to the next person here. Let's ask Andy Hoffman. So Andy, what do you have any response to that? And what is your thoughts on Bitcoin possibly becoming centralized on a deal like this?
Right. Well, there's definitely no one on the planet who has more thoughts about futures contracts and what they can do to markets. And yes, Bill is right. The COMEX is in New York, and I've spent 15 years observing, commentating on, analyzing what's gone on in New York and London, and I can probably do many hours discussing it. But the fact is, there is a futures contract coming up for Bitcoin. Most importantly of anything is the fact that it gives it legitimacy, just like when Amazon.com accepts it or the ETFs get approved. It's just the whole world that had been laughing at it, the whole Gandhi quote, the laugh at it, deny it, all jumping on board and realizing that it's for real. And I don't know how, over the course of this call, all the different topics we're going to say, but I'll say one thing that I've been asked more than anything. Oh, does this just mean that they're going to naked short it like they do the gold price and the silver price? And yes, they do. That's what I've been following for years. And my thoughts is that I've always thought that the fintech, that the powers that be have developed to manipulate markets, and not just gold, stocks, bonds, currencies, you name it, is they've run into I wrote something recently called like the pea shooter against the cannon, because the Bitcoin technology is so much more advanced than the high-speed algorithms that they've used, and I think they've met their match, and for a couple of reasons also. For one, I think the blockchain is kind of a giant truth teller, and they're going to realize that trying to make 100x times paper Bitcoin is going to kind of be a lot more visible than the opaque gold market. Remember, you have all these central banks that for decades have purported to have all of these reserves that are never audited. And they have been including we have the WikiLeaks, wires from back in 1974. People remember the gold and silver futures market literally went online the day before gold and silver ownership was legalized by the public. And there was major collusion out there to make sure they created this exchange to prevent hoarding. It's a whole thing. And this is what I followed for my entire, last 15 years of my career. But in the case of Bitcoin, not only is the fintech and the blockchain a lot more transparent and powerful than what they have, but the governments, everyone knows the governments don't have any inventories. They don't even have inventories that they could be leasing or swapping. They got nothing. And on top of that, you have the blockchain there. So I just think that when you have the Chinese government trying to ban Bitcoin and looking stupid because the price doubles, or Jamie Dimon, who's pretty much the biggest market rigger of all, doing the same thing and everything blows up in his face too. I think they're just going to be meeting their match, because personally, I think that the futures exchange is going to cause, a big part of that wall of institutional money. It's going to be the door for them to first get in. And then when those ETFs get approved, man, it's going to be crazy.
Awesome. Thank you, Andy, so much for your thoughts on that. We'll go with Simon next. Everybody's nodding their head. I think we're all in agreement with everything Bill and Andy has said so far. So awesome stuff, guys. So Simon, let's go with you next. What are your thoughts on this, and what are your thoughts on it maybe possibly centralizing Bitcoin too much to where there could be some huge manipulation?
Well, I don't see it doing. We've already had the ability to short and long Bitcoin for a long time. So this isn't necessarily a new innovation. This is just a new era, I guess, for Bitcoin adoption. So that's how I see it. So this doesn't bring anything new that we haven't been able to do before. The difference is that institutional players are going to be able to do this, and traditional players that for years have looked at Bitcoin as this crazy thing for drug dealers that's got no legitimacy, that could be a Ponzi scheme, that could be a scam. Essentially, that could not go on. It wouldn't get a futures market with a traditional player like CME. So this has done. I'd say there's three major effects that have come from this. The first is this brings a ginormous amount of new volume that we haven't seen before. Although it's a little bit silly, because the best way to gain exposure to Bitcoin is to own your own private key and own your own Bitcoins. However, speculators will be speculators, and products like leverage and futures markets will bring in a whole new wave of hedge funds and traditional players, and ones that need to follow some kind of regulations as well. Another really nice side effect is that something that's not so commonly talked about and a bit geeky, but actually, what is the price of Bitcoin? The price of Bitcoin up until now has just been a conglomerate of different exchanges, and we've had players like media players like maybe CoinDesk that have created their own indexes. But now to actually get some institutional grade, heavy experienced people from CME that actually have to price futures based upon the price of Bitcoin. And when you're pricing futures, you're talking billions and billions of people's money on the line. So you have to get that right. So I think this adds a new layer of professionalism in terms of how they actually get the price of Bitcoin. And some major techniques have been used over the years to actually make sure that those prices are fair, and smooth out some flash crashes or things that we've seen in exchanges like GDAX and others. So a new level of professionalism on what is the price of Bitcoin is a really good side effect. New money coming in, new speculators, and I'd say that the major thing is just legitimacy in the eyes of traditional financial players, where they can no longer say a lot of the things that Jamie Dimon says, because it just can't be a fraud and get by these traditional checks and measures and regulations and everything that's involved in that. So all around is just three very good things. In terms of actual financial innovation, is nothing. We've already had this. BitMEX is doing about $1 billion in Bitcoin futures in the last 24 hours. And full disclosure, I'm an investor in many of the exchanges like Bitfinex, Bitstamp, Kraken, and others. So leverage has existed, but I don't think it's going to change my trading. Well, I don't trade, but I don't think it's, I do lend Bitcoins for interest, so some of them at risk for those that want to go short and long and various other things. But I don't think it's going to change my actual trading behavior. I think it's just going to bring in a whole new group of traders. And whether it will manipulate it or centralize it, well, it's subject to everything that the traditional market is now subject to. In that sense, and it's just growing. What we're experiencing right now is Bitcoin going beyond that original hardcore group of sound money people to Wall Street and retail now, which we said we had a huge retail introduction into the sector, mainly coming through Ethereum, that are now finding Bitcoin, realizing that Bitcoin's a store of value, and that the way they lock in their profits from any ICOs that they've invested in is to go back to Bitcoin. And now we're getting Wall Street, who have been on the sideline for an incredibly long time. They've all been investing their own money in Bitcoin as individuals, but now you can take some of that institutional money, which is far and away a much larger pocket of money. And futures is just the first step. Once you get futures, you get ETF. Once you have good pricing, you then have different financial products. Then you have fund managers that are pushing in pension money and insurance money, and some of the real pockets of university endowment funds and various other things. We've already had the family offices. So Bitcoin is going mainstream. That's all it is. That is being reflected in the price right now, which is still, in my opinion, significantly undervalued, because each year we're going to have more utility, and a futures market on CME is new utility, and that's just excellent and all around good news.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Speculators are not your enemy. That's not. They add volume, liquidity that make it easier to attract the institutions, because it's easier to handle larger orders, and you need a vibrant and liquid speculative market. And You know, nobody does it better than CME.
Awesome, awesome. Great stuff, guys. I mean, clearly it's already affected the price, right? It's made Bitcoin go up a little bit. So I think that's definitely reflecting the price a little bit. I think we hit new all-time highs, obviously 75.50 or something like that on Bitstamp. So just kind of crazy times for Bitcoin right now. And of course, we're expecting to go much, much higher as these new financial instruments begin to come online. So let's go next to then Mr. Valentin. What is your thoughts on the CME so far, and what is your thoughts on it possibly bring in some unwanted manipulation?
So I would agree with what most of the people said. There's a lot of positives to it in terms of legitimacy. Definitely, I agree with Bill. Speculators are important for future markets, and yeah, so that's positive. I have a slightly different take on the new money inflows, because if you look at how future markets work, basically in order to buy futures, somebody else must open a short position. It works kind of like a zipper, up and down, and that determines the open interest. So it's purely a paper product. You print up those contracts, and then the contract, as far as I know, is cash settled. So there's no delivery like gold. You can't force delivery. You settle it cash, which has led to the trading of 100 times, 200 times annual gold production. And with gold, at least, they have managed to hijack the price, because the spot price is now the future price, the most recent future, nearest to settlement. And it's sort of circular between the LBMA and the futures price. One determines the other, and we have gold manipulation. That's a fact. So I'm slightly worried that this may affect Bitcoin, where people just print up futures and depress the price. And then if people were to accept that price as the benchmark, then it would also go down on exchanges. Because one thing has to be absolutely made clear: there are no Bitcoins changing hands. You can have $1 trillion of Wall Street flowing into the future market. Not a single Bitcoin will change hands, because it's all cash settled. It's all denominated in dollars. So of course, if they're all buying and the future price goes up, then maybe that will carry over to demand from the actual exchanges, where after you take your Bitcoin out, it's real Bitcoin, it's real on-chain transactions. But that also works for the downside. So to be honest, it may be a distraction. It may be a fact that the institutions use that and they don't buy the real Bitcoin. And then we have to see how the interplay goes. Does it influence the real price for the real product, positively or negatively? And with gold, it's definitely been negative. So I'm less sure how this is going to develop.
Well, can I add something here, Vortex?
Oh yeah, go ahead, you, Andy, and then I believe Bill has something to say. Yep.
Yeah, because again, there's so much. Everything that's going on in Bitcoin is a paradigm change. It's a paradigm change that right now 95% of the entire professional investment community doesn't understand. And then you have, of course, like for instance, the gold community, which I was a major part of for a long time. And you kind of get this feeling of inertia, which things can never change. Governments could do whatever they want. All they have to do is naked short, naked short. And I'm trying to say that Bitcoin is a decentralized thing. It's impossible. Governments don't collude about Bitcoin. Governments don't even know what to do, but governments don't even understand what Bitcoin is. They don't own any Bitcoin. They have no experience with it. They don't know how to manipulate it. And to say, people want to believe, oh yeah, well, the US government's like, well, we're scared of Bitcoin. We're just going to naked short $10 trillion of Bitcoin. That'll get recognized by the markets right away. There's only so much Bitcoin out there. And I think that it's really just a paradigm change that people need to understand, that the same old, like I said before, the pea shooter and the cannon, these same things are not going to work. I mean, can you imagine if the Chinese government banned gold or gold exchanges, what the price of gold would have just done? And it did not. What did Bitcoin do? It went up. Or if Jamie Dimon came out and said that gold is a fraud and everyone would sell it. This is a different world. Jamie Dimon, the US government, they don't have power. They don't even know what to do with this stuff. So I think they're going to be overwhelmed by the amount of demand that comes in as people start to realize this is the new store of value, period.
Yep, very interesting stuff. Valentin, did you want to respond to that or no?
No, actually, I think he's right. I think all these tactics ultimately won't work with Bitcoin, but then all the positives that we've mentioned, they also won't except for the brand name, the legitimacy. But the inflows then also won't matter that much. So I think this is more like a neutral thing, except for the brand name, except for the net recognition. Maybe get some people to think more about it. But it could also mean that some Wall Street people who don't know what Bitcoin is, they just say, oh, I'm just going to buy the future. And they think they own the real thing. Whereas for me, Bitcoin, one of the major positives has been personally that I had to educate myself. I had to learn. I had to learn how to put it on a hardware wallet, all this kind of stuff. I think those are all positives. And that may not happen now because you've got this relatively simple, already existing financial instrument, which is a financial instrument. It's not the real deal. But
yeah, I think I think the important thing there is that not the futures is the way that people are going to actually invest in Bitcoin. Certainly the way that some will speculate on Bitcoin, but it's the fact that this is the first of many products to come now. And the innovation, once you've opened up Pandora's box, once you've got a regulated institution that's managed to, create a product like this on a scale like this, then that's just going to be what, every blockchain innovation department at every financial institution right now is now getting peed off that they didn't get their announcement out first. And then this lays the path for all the other products. But the reason I don't see it as too unattractive is because actually the financial innovation that can come from actually owning Bitcoin and owning your own private key is too early for traditional play. You've got to look back at your journey. You probably bought Bitcoin on a peer-to-peer trade. I mean, I know I bought my first just at a conference on a peer-to-peer trade. And then you started. Say that again.
I was a bit late, and actually Kraken cost me at least $200 last year when I wanted to buy it $400, and then it took me 4 weeks to open an account and get verified, and then the price was already at $675. But I did buy an exchange, and I also had to go through that process.
And then most people are storing it on exchange. Then they need to lose their Bitcoins to realize that's a bad idea. And then they start learning how to use a hardware wallet. And it's like a 1 to 2 year process from you deciding that you want to buy Bitcoin to actually realizing how you should hold Bitcoin. But what I think is really interesting is people have been searching for what is the killer app of smart contracts. Well, I've actually always believed that futures and derivatives are actually a killer app of smart contracts, and it actually does have a huge efficiency. And as we are starting to see, the era of decentralized exchanges start to develop a user experience that might be able to compete with a centralized exchange, then I also think you're going to see that as people getting to futures in a traditional way, or they're getting through an ETF in a traditional way, they go through their 2 year journey of realizing that you can now own your own asset, spend your own money, have a sound monetary policy to benefit from the upsides and downsides. And I think you'll see, not everyone will, obviously some people will always be standoffish and just sit on the side, but a massive percentage will, I think a good percentage will move towards owning Bitcoin the way it was originally designed. And then I think totally the futures market in my eye is going to be disrupted by decentralized smart contracts, people swapping exposure to different assets, because once you have programmable, a programmable underlying asset, then you can program the futures contract into the asset. Maybe CME are working on that already. And it's not that everyone will move towards one. You will have people that need to go through a regulated institution, people that need to own their own asset, people that want to use a Bitcoin exchange that's unregulated for that user case. And then people want to use fully decentralized for some reason, and there'll be innovation that comes on top of that. So this is just Pandora's box opening up to all the other products that are going to come from Wall Street.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. In fact, when I do these podcasts, I rarely write notes, but I am scribbling notes like crazy right now, and so many things that have been said just from, Simon.
Well, Andy, yes, real quick, yes. Let me just stop you, because since you have notes, let me just go to Bill first, because I know he had something to say. And then Andy. So, Bill, so you have to unmute there though, Bill, just so you know you are muted. So you just hover over the top. There you go. Go ahead, Bill.
No, I understand the fear that without a physical delivery mechanism, the CME's contract could diverge with a spot price. But one of the first jobs I had in the business was arbitraging between CME's foreign currency futures and the spot markets in New York. And if they got more than 3 ticks wide, that was worth it for us, to buy the cheap and sell the expensive, and that profit motive keeps those in line. Profit motive is a wonderful cure to keeping those two prices tethered together. And I'm sure if that spread gets too wide, some arbitrage operations at the CME are gonna, start setting it up between the Bitcoin futures and Bitcoin spot, and keep them in line.
But how does it work if it's cash settled?
Well, hopefully, if the contract is constructed properly, the cash settlement is a reflection of the spot price. And from what I know about this contract, it's going to cash settle against 9 different liquid spot markets throughout the world. So, although the not needing to physically deliver is really just a convenience. For all intent and purposes, you're settling against a physical price if they've done a good job constructing the contract.
Go ahead, Andy.
Right. Well, first of all, Bill, I love the no 2x thing behind you. It kind of reminds me of the Bitcoin sign guy. Okay, so here are a few things just from what Simon said. Scarcity. Okay, Simon is saying people are going to own Bitcoin in a different way that they own other things. People that are on Wall Street are just getting into, they're all excited. There's a CME contract. Most of them have never even had the ability to own Bitcoin, except in say GBTC. They're going to be learning. They're on this learning curve, not just of how to store it, but how it works and why they're trading it. It's all this volume and all the factors behind it. And what they are going to learn is what we learned the last few years, is that it is scarce. And gold may be scarce with quotes around it because, yes, the supply goes up very slowly, but it's not that scarce. There's a lot of it in the world, and it keeps getting mined. And also, the governments are known to have large amounts of it, that they can do all kinds of things with it. And people are used to trading with futures in the gold market for years and years. No one has the fear that they're not going to be able to get their hands on gold. Maybe if we had another giant crisis like in 2008, or some kind of geopolitical thing like a war with North Korea. But when it comes to Bitcoin, the reason we're also excited about it is that we know that there's only 21 million minus whatever has been lost. And there's going to be a grab for the real thing. And when there's not much of the real thing out there, it gets really, really, terrifying for people to think that they're not going to be able to get it. And then when Simon's talking about these decentralized exchanges, oh yeah, that's right. It's a decentralized app. And now that we have SegWit and all these other applications, there's going to be as much trading off-chain as there is on-chain. And so, we talk about the COMEX and the CME, the New York Stock Exchange. These are all going to be things of the past when we have decentralized exchanges and atomic swaps and all kinds of technology that the greatest market riggers on Wall Street have no idea what this stuff is that's coming at them.
Absolutely great points. I mean, I think that we can all agree that from what we've read and seen, there's just huge amounts of pent-up demand for Bitcoin as a product. That's why, the futures market had to be created. And from everything that they've said, they've just said their customers are screaming at us, you have to let us get a hold of this asset. We have to be able to get a hold of Bitcoin, because I think they're seeing the price rise and they're really missing out. And so it's just very interesting. And even JP Morgan, right? Like one of the biggest market makers is a part of CME. So I guess Jamie Dimon might have to fire himself or something. So we'll see how that goes. But very interesting. All right. So let's go ahead and go to the next question. We'll start with Bill again. So Bill, let me ask you. I know you don't maybe pay, I don't know how much attention you've been paying to the 2X fork or not, coming up here in November. It's a pretty big deal. And so I just wonder maybe if I could get your thoughts on how do you think the CME, the news, because they're supposed to launch on November 14th, which is just a couple of days before the fork. So I was just wondering, how do you think that this futures market will be affected by the fork, and how will they affect each other? What can we expect?
Yeah, I think we're probably, your viewers will benefit more if I pass on that one. I'm just not. My opinion on the 2x debate. I'm really just going to repeat Jack's opinion and Brooke, because they're more involved with the technical aspects, and they I don't think I can valuably contribute on that question. So can I?
No problem. No problem, Bill. We can pass. So let me just go with we'll go with Valentin first because he went last time. So Valentin, what are your thoughts on this? Because this is supposed to launch just a couple days before the fork, and so if it did, what do you think we can expect from this craziness all at once?
Well, to be honest, that would be one of the advantages then, that it's completely disconnected from the underlying, except for what Bill said in terms of the arbitrage, that the Bitcoin future is the Bitcoin future, and the big institutions, they don't work like blockchain startups where they change stuff on a whim. They've probably been working on this for 1 or 2 years, so they're not going to make the 2x future. No, they go through with the underlying, and they will construct the price the way they had it in mind before. So from that angle, I don't think for them it matters at all, unless of course the 2x becomes the dominant Bitcoin, and then they may think about creating a future for that, or they may create one either way, but that takes time. So for the next 2 weeks, I don't see any impact from the 2x on the futures market.
Okay, very interesting. Do you think it'll affect do you think it'll affect the price of Bitcoin? Because we are expecting a correction from the 2x, because there's going to be some confusion, and I'm sure there's going to be some issues. I mean, do you think that the futures will kind of save the price of Bitcoin and keep it from crashing too much?
Again, that's the question we are asking. If Bill is right, and the arbitrage works, which it can, even though it's cash settled, if it's constructed very well, then yes, yeah, because the Wall Street will be buying. If they said we want this future market, then we can guess it's going to be on the upside. But it really depends on the interplay, because if the normal price is crashing, then maybe the normal price influences the futures price, and everybody who has speculated in futures, because it's a highly levered market, they know that it's not fun being on a levered long position. Then maybe it will exacerbate the movement to the downside. So it really depends, and in that way, it's unfortunate that it starts during such a volatile period, because that is going to be really interesting to see the interplay between the two prices, which price can influence which price, and that's going to be harder to find out if we have confusion on the traditional pricing mechanism.
Very interesting. Okay, let's go with Simon next here. Simon, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think that if it did launch before the 2x fork, that it would be like too volatile of a time? Do you think that we would are things going to go crazy? Simon, give us your thoughts.
Firstly, I'd like to congratulate CME on picking the most outstandingly interesting date ever to launch, which is 2 days before the most controversial hard fork we've ever had. I would have thought it would have been the 18th or the Monday after, but they picked the 14th. So I am so happy and so excited that they picked that date, because it actually means a few things. Firstly, for those Bitcoin Cash people that keep tweeting me that Bitcoin Cash is the Bitcoin, we need to ask CME first, which one's Bitcoin, because there's only one future at the moment on Bitcoin, and I don't think it's factoring in Bitcoin Cash. So we know that Bitcoin Cash is not Bitcoin, according to what's actually happening on the ground with the development, use case, innovation, and everything that's moving forward. So that's just a fascinating result. That Bitcoin is the Bitcoin that people, these institutions are building products on. And deciding to use. Now, 14th, if I was, that is either they're not in touch with the Bitcoin community, or this, I don't know. It's just an insane date to pick. I wouldn't be surprised if they change that date and decide to launch after. But the second thing it highlights as well, and if they do launch on the 15th, and hopefully they're watching this, then it also shows that those financial institutions that decide that they want to actually own Bitcoin via a future, which seems like a very expensive way to actually do it, and fraught with issues, But those that do actually want to do it, they'll realize, oh, I haven't got any of my Bitcoin dividends. And so all the other people that owned Bitcoin will realize that they've got this new altcoin. You know, I had to explain to my mom yesterday that, by the way, you've got this Bitcoin Cash and this Bitcoin Gold, and it's just a load of free money that you can then convert to Bitcoin, and over Christmas I'll show you how to do it. But also the same with, you know, if SegWit 2x, you know, it actually, as every exchange right now is treating it as an altcoin by creating the two different tickers, and the whole point of not adding replay protection was because the original goal was certainly with SegWit 2x was to actually have one ticker, one Bitcoin, and that was what they wanted to do different from Bitcoin Cash. But the beauty of this is that just as CME are creating futures products and everything that comes from that throughout 2018, you've got to be grateful for 2x, because the way that I'm trying to look at it from a cup is half full side is that the final test, look, we got the test of how to actually, you know, treat a cryptocurrency that was created as a hard fork that is actually an altcoin, and that was Bitcoin Cash. But what we needed is all the exchanges and all the wallets to now create their infrastructure for how they're actually going to deal with a hard fork that happens without replay protection. And now SegWit 2x is forcing, at the end of the year, when everyone, you know, a great year, all the exchanges, all the wallets have had record volume, they're hiring like crazy. The biggest challenge in the sector right now is finding staff, and there's a load of staff that are all leaving the banks and now working in the sector. That was their biggest challenge. Now their biggest challenge is towards the end of the year is we've got to create a process whereby when a hard fork happens without replay protection, how we handle that. And then the second time round next year in 2018, when it comes along, it will be a lot easier to deal with, and the whole industry will have case studies and examples of how to do it. And only the people that actually own Bitcoin will be the ones that can kind of benefit from that. And it means all the infrastructure, essentially, that they're calling it a Bitcoin upgrade. I'm calling it an infrastructure upgrade by all the companies that are now having to do the work to make sure that they actually protect their customers and build better systems that can handle all this stuff in the future. And then, yeah, you got CME that comes in on the 16th. Maybe it will create, it could go one or two ways, would be my forecast. I think leading up to the hard fork, you're going to see a lot of people that are going to take that trade of trying to short Bitcoin and try and catch, you know, a real big, you know, a big movement as a result of that. But these institutional traders and these hedge funds, if they're getting in for the first time, they're going to see the full wrath and the full almighty problem of what happens when you short Bitcoin. So hopefully they'll be covering those very quickly. But over the last few months, we've seen some really, really nasty trades from people trying to short Bitcoin, forecasting what might happen with this 2x, and realizing that, you know, most of the profit is made in just holding Bitcoin rather than trying to take some of these trades.
It's crazy. Yeah. I mean, I think we saw a $45 million short. Is that get liquidated? I mean, that is some scary stuff. That guy's out. So we have to keep, you know, for those paying attention to all the futures markets, it's been pretty crazy. Like Simon has said, it's really getting hairy out there. And as the price keeps going up and going up, you know, there's more and more people that think, hey, well, this has got to come down. This has got to come down. Let's just short it. But you don't short Bitcoin. It's not a good idea. I don't recommend it. So let's go on with Andy for the same question. Andy, what do you think about you know, this 2x? If they did launch on or around the fork, what kind of madness do you think that would cause? Would we see some crazy price fluctuations, or would it have a negative or positive benefit? What are your thoughts?
Right. Well, look, this is all about learning curve. Okay, it's a learning curve for the CME. It's a learning curve for Wall Street. It's a learning curve for the Bitcoin community to see what happens when Wall Street comes into Bitcoin, especially around such major events as this. You know, you see, the question was like, well, how are they going to handle the SegWit, you know, with the futures contract? And as Valentin said, it'll be fine. That's not the issue. The bigger issue was, well, how are they going to handle an ETF? Oh my God, what happens if you own Bitcoin, but then it splits in half and you have an ETF? Do you have to have two ETFs? That kind of stuff. And as we saw, just like what we saw with GBTC a week or two ago, they figure out a solution. They say, hey, we're going to sell the Bitcoin cash and give it back to people. Or maybe they'll at some point say, we'll reinvest it and give everyone a Bitcoin dividend or whatever, something like that. But the fact is, they'll figure this out.
That is really dangerous move though, legally. I would hate to be on the line for determining how to manage that, how to pick a price, how to time it. That's a really, that's why I believe the only move is you just have to leave the users to decide exactly what they're going to do. But it's just really interesting. How do you have a futures contract where you get a future delivery on Bitcoin plus all its subsets, and what happens to the subsets in the meantime? That's a fascinating question that I just don't believe there's any case study in history to kind of compare that to.
Oh, absolutely. Again, it's a learning curve, because we all thought when we had the first fork with Bcash, okay, it's no big deal. The wallet's got it and you split it. But now it's like, oh my God, they're juggling B-Gold at the same time. That doesn't even come out yet. Now they got to deal with the 2X. Then there could be some other stuff going on. They have futures contracts. And, as for, why they picked that date, the 14th, there's you could just go with the Occam's razor that the CME is like, wow, there's going to be a lot of volume that day. We like volume. Right? Or maybe they actually haven't talked enough to the Bitcoin community to realize that maybe this isn't the first day you want your computers and your brokers to be dealing with this. Or maybe, maybe they actually like, yeah, let's just tackle this. This will be, it'll be fun. It'll be an experiment. But the point is, I'm not worried about what the futures contracts will do. I think it's a good thing. Unlike the gold market, which has been a long established collusion over many decades, this is brand new. The trend is up. The trend in gold has been flat to down for a long time. The trend in Bitcoin is up. So the traders that come in are going to be largely buying. And yes, there's always going to be people that want to short events, especially, but this is the most telegraphed short of all time, right? We're going to have a crash. We're going to have a crash. But weren't we supposed to have a big crash because of Bcash? And Bcash, the price doubled within a month. As you're saying, when you try to short Bitcoin, you learn very quickly that when we're in the mother of all bullish positive trends, people are going to, for the most part, be bullish. So I have no idea what will happen around the fork. I'm not scared of it at all. I'm very, very excited to see how Wall Street gets into this. And my guess is most of Wall Street is just going to be buying blindly because they have to, because this is the biggest sector, because now it's professional. Now there's futures and there's going to be ETFs right behind it. And because, remember, people, January 1st is when all these new hedge funds are going to come into business. There's so many that start because it's from an accounting perspective. And I can bet you, when you hear Brian Kelly talking about the wall of institutional money coming in, a lot of what he's talking about is next year when all these hedge funds come in, which are going to be buying, Bitcoin is 70% of the dominance index, 70% of our fund is going to be Bitcoin and 20% will be Ethereum, whatever. So, like Simon said, the best thing that we all say is just hold your Bitcoin, watch the fireworks. Maybe we do have a decline because of 2X, but if we do, it's not going to be because 2X is breaking up Bitcoin. It's just going to be because there's drama. We had a drop before the Bcash fork, price went right back up. Maybe we'll have a drop before this. Maybe we won't.
Awesome.
Can I chime in on professional money manager like hedge funds?
Go ahead, Bill, please.
I used to write presentations for managed futures, and you would think that first slide is about your performance or your track record, your approach to the market. They wanted non-correlation up there because professional money understands that you're going to hit the next bear market. Somebody's going to fly an airplane into the World Trade Center. You didn't see that coming. But if you have some non-correlated assets, if the stock market drops 30%, but you only drop 10%, you can retain your client then, right? And so just having, and in Bitcoin, I think just, I haven't run any correlation coefficients on it, but just just anecdotally, I think Bitcoin is not correlated whatsoever with traditional financial assets. And that's a great sales tool that I don't think people appreciate when you talk about professional money management.
Yeah, Bill, Bitcoin is the least correlated asset I've ever seen to financial markets.
Isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean that bails you out. These guys don't have to be Bitcoiners. They don't have to be libertarians or crypto anarchists. They want to, they get paid two ways. Obviously percentage of performance, but you pay the bills with your management fees. You don't want your clients running out on the next, because you're going to hit a bear market. So yeah, you always have to have a percentage, 10, 20%, that is non-correlated to your traditional assets.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I would like to chime in, and then I have to
please.
leave. But what the Bill says is absolutely right from a portfolio management perspective. It's a free lunch. You reduce the risk and boost the upside. Andy says the same thing in terms of the price. Because the way how futures market works, again, if you want to buy it, you have to have some. It's like if I want to buy Bitcoin, somebody has to sell it to me. Except for in the future markets, if I want to enter a contract, somebody has to want to enter a short contract, and that needs to be created with a certain type of leverage always built in. So nobody wants to short Bitcoin. I agree with you guys. So if I'm a buyer, a futures buyer, I have to convince the other party to short Bitcoin. And how do I convince them? Is by paying a very, very high price for somebody to enter the short contract. So even though the volume may be low because you just don't have a lot of people on the short side, the price of the futures may actually be higher than the spot price on the exchanges. And again, I don't know how that will influence the real price, but it will certainly be very interesting to see. So I have to run. It's late.
Tell us where we can find you, Valentin. Tell us where we can find you.
Well, you have my Twitter here. I finally figured out the toolbox, Hangouts toolbox. Please follow me on Twitter. And it was a pleasure discussing Bitcoin with you guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, man. Have a good night.
Thank you. Goodbye.
All right, so let's go ahead then. If nobody else has anything else to comment, let's go ahead and start a new question here. So we'll start with Bill. Bill, so this will be the final question, I guess, for you guys tonight. So let me ask you, Bill, what's next then for like Bitcoin on Wall Street? What is your price predictions coming up? Like, what do you think the price is going to look like going into next year and maybe at the end of the year?
You just seriously asked me to predict the price of oh my gosh.
Yeah. First, let's ask. What do you think is next?
My contacts in China and my deep understanding of the central banks of the world. The one thing that you learn.
Tell us what's next then for Bitcoin and Wall Street.
Is the price higher than it was? Markets tend to trend. And if you get some type of change in the supply and demand, that market is not going to automatically reprice it at the next day's opening, right? It needs, so man, it's one of the first things you learn if you're going to try to build a career in speculation. Is the price higher than it was 3 months ago? Is that price higher than it was 3 months, prior to that? Then it's going higher, and you want to be with the trend. So yeah, Bitcoin has shown that resilience, and those things become self-reinforcing. So I don't have any particular price target, but I don't see any change in this trend. I mean, I always tell people, is this feeling heavy to you? Is it feeling saturated? Go through your contacts. How many of them own Bitcoin? 2. I mean, it really hasn't even penetrated, wealthy people with internet connections and stuff. I think I don't see that this does not feel saturated to me whatsoever.
Awesome.
I don't have a price prediction, but I think we got a lot more demand that hasn't even I think how many people do you know that own Bitcoin?
Not very many outside of the Bitcoin space, that's for sure. So that's still coming. So awesome. Thanks, Bill, for that. Let's go with Andy next. Andy, what do you think is coming next really for Bitcoin and Wall Street? What do you think we can expect?
Right. Well, first, I'll go back to that. We're talking about being an uncorrelated asset. And, anyone in our space who sees that there's absolutely, to say there's no correlation, there's Bitcoin is in its own world. And the reason that it's going up all the time is that it could not care less about financial markets. It is going to be the future of financial markets. It's just gradually building this new paradigm completely off to the side of financial markets. They couldn't care less about any news, about anything a central bank does, anything a government does, anything that GDP does, or any of that stuff. So yes, it is in its own world, and it's really, really exciting, especially for me, who's had to deal with like gold for so long, which is 100% correlated to every single thing that goes on in the financial markets. Now, the second thing, we're talking about unsaturated. To say that if we're going to say that Bitcoin is the most unsaturated, the most uncorrelated market I've ever seen, well, I would say it's the most unsaturated market as well, because people in the financial world have absolutely no clue about what Bitcoin is. No one owns it. And if they did even have a clue about it, just figuring out, as Simon said, it takes you a year or so just to figure out, oh, that's right, you got to keep it off the exchange. Oh, I got to buy these wallets. You know, and of course, no one on Wall Street is allowed from a fiduciary duty to have, like, all their clients' money on Trezors. And of course, they read the horror shows about what happens at exchanges. So Wall Street absolutely positively owns absolutely no Bitcoin at all, aside from a couple of savvy guys who own and girls who own it personally. And as for what's next for Wall Street, the futures market is just opening the door. The future is going to be ETFs. That's what the entire financial market has turned into. No one trades individual stocks anymore. It's all about ETFs. Heck, the Japanese government owns like 2/3 or more of all the ETFs in Japan, which is a hint at what some of the central banks are going to do with the Bitcoin and the Bitcoin ETFs. It's all going to be about ETFs. And once that first one gets approved, and it will get approved, because because Wall Street is going to lobby like crazy now that it's a big market cap. And I mean, there aren't words for my thoughts about how much demand is going to come into the sector once those ETFs are approved.
Awesome. Very awesome.
That saturation argument is, I mean, let's wrap this up so I can go buy some more. If that's true, and that you know, yeah, there's a lot of fuel in this.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, everybody, go ahead and sell their house now, refinance their. No, okay. Let's go with Simon next. We're as you can tell, ladies and gentlemen, we're a little bullish on Bitcoin here at the Bitcoin News Show. But this is we still try to bring you as much information as we can. So let's go with Simon next. Simon, what are your thoughts on what's next for Bitcoin and Wall Street and the discussion so far?
Well, there's some really good points here. So first thing is, once you've got a reputable futures market, you've got to then look at what does that drive next. Well, I think one of the next things we'll see is institutional grade mining. So I think we'll see some of the big mining chip manufacturers that will just start to get into Bitcoin mining, because they can now risk manage correctly and they can hedge, which is the original user case of a futures market was to hedge risk. By taking the other side of speculators. So on the other side of the speculators, there is this real user case that when people are mining Bitcoin, they can have a couple of strategies. Either they've got the balance sheet in order to pay all their bills in US dollars and hold the Bitcoin, which is a strategy that many of the traditional miners might have been adopting up until now. But most miners have to actually sell their Bitcoin in order to pay their bills and their electricity and everything. So now they can actually use some hedging strategies using these futures. They've probably been doing it on exchanges already. But I think this opens up the reason that Bitcoin mining has been kind of done up to this date by, but I think that opens up for more institutions and more, more security for the Bitcoin network. It might bring up our next centralized challenge. But Bitcoin, what I always say to people is Bitcoin, many people, criticize Bitcoin at the moment for not being decentralized enough. And what everyone has to remember is that the entire economy of Bitcoin is completely decentralized and the most decentralized thing we've ever seen. However, there's pockets of centralization within the players of that. So, we all know that mining has too much centralization in China. However, what we have seen is that when the miners try and actually, implement changes in the code, then you have a 3-year scaling debate and everything we've seen, and then they create their own coin, and then that own coin becomes, an altcoin. And so we've proven that nobody has the full ultimate control. People complain about some of the developers being controlled by companies. Well, if they are being controlled by companies, we've shown that what we're about to see with SegWit2x is when companies overstep their mark and they try and get too much control over Bitcoin itself, then SegWit2x will prove that actually is an epic failure as well. So that's what I think we're up to see. So the original hedge case. Now, you cannot underestimate what the other guests, what Bill and Andy and everyone had been talking about, this uncorrelated asset. That is such a huge thing. It will become completely irresponsible of any fund manager that's holding, you know, very long positions in one of the largest bull markets that we've seen since the financial crisis. And remember, we have not solved any of the problems of the financial crisis yet. They still all exist. However, we used central bank quantitative easing. We used different products in order to prop up the market again and create this almighty bull market in stock markets, property markets, bond markets, everything. So every financial institution, every portfolio is heavily exposed to any kind of correction in traditional markets right now. Now, if you have the ability to safeguard that portfolio by holding Bitcoin, which in a bull market is going through rapid growth, rapid user adoption, rapid new user cases being added every single month, new ICOs producing new innovation, which 90% of them will fail, but 10% of them will produce something that actually makes Bitcoin more useful, and all this other innovation, this rapid innovation that's funding itself, that's creating a feedback loop at the moment, making Bitcoin stronger and stronger and stronger, so that during a bull market, yes, it's very volatile. Who knows what the price is short term? I got no idea. But however, during these bull markets, it's becoming more and more useful, and the economics are not changing. The supply is still smaller than the new demand, and that's why the price is going up at the moment, because more people are finding user cases for it, whether it's store of value, whether it's you know, using it as a currency, whether it's, you know, frictionless transfer of value all around the world. And then when you have all this decentralized products and decentralized exchanges and decentralized futures markets and everything that's coming in the pipeline for the next 2 years, couple that with the fact that we're halving the money supply in 2020, which is only a couple of years away now, you know, 2.5 years away, then you've got all these economics that make Bitcoin work in the bull market. And then if you have a bear market, you've got an uncorrelated asset, which will drive a tremendous amount of traditional asset classes that need to cash in at the top, and maybe are trying to, you know, get out of those in a bear market. And a lot of that money is going to make its way into Bitcoin. And my forecast is that traditionally that would have gone to gold. And I think the percentages that are moving to gold in this market where we are today, given that all the banks in the world have talked about blockchain, everyone knows what blockchain is. Pretty much everyone in the world, if you ask a random person in the street, what is Bitcoin? And I do that wherever I go. I just come back from Philippines. Wherever I go, I speak to people on the street, in the restaurant. You know, I'm not talking about in a Bitcoin conference. In the restaurant, have you heard of Bitcoin? Oh yeah, that's that digital currency thing, or that's that thing. They don't quite know what it is, but everybody in the world has heard of Bitcoin, as far as I can tell from my just on the street experiments. That's an amazing progress. And now you're going to get this asset reallocation, and more people are educated on that. And it's the search for yield, it's the search for capital appreciation. And that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the more and more products are going to be built.
And Simon, you don't ever see it really becoming uncorrelated, right? Because this market is going to grow to such huge things. It's just going to end up swallowing every other market eventually, kind of like software swallowed everything.
Well, this is an exit. The way that I got into Bitcoin is because it was an exit from banking. And this works without governments and works without banks, which means that by definition, it can't be correlated to everything that the governments and banks are involved in. Now, there will be two Bitcoin markets. There's a regulated government Bitcoin market, exchanges, KYC, all that stuff. But you can't change the fact that there's this censorship-resistant Bitcoin that works without whatever this Bitcoin is doing. The other Bitcoin still works and still creates that exact user case of an exit from traditional finance, an exit to safeguard your deposits, an exit from whatever government policy, whether government takes cash away, whether government does quantitative easing, whether government saturate the money supply, whether they close your ATM, whether they bail out the banks, whether the banks bail in your cash. No matter what happens, Bitcoin is already that exit. It already exists. That's the user case. But that user case is going to get bigger and bigger every single month, because the innovation and the amount of personnel that are coming from traditional finance into this sector, you know, essentially this sector is really, really taking top talent away from the banking system Because if you've got a choice of being in the banks or doing something this exciting, I think most people are at that stage right now where they've earned a lot of money from banking, and now they really want to do something fulfilling that's going to change the world and work on different goals. And Bitcoin is that fulfilling thing that does change the world. And it's been, you know, incredibly exciting for the last 7 to 8 years. And you've got another 7 to 8 years of innovation. And I've always said that Bitcoin is either worth nothing or $1 million. There is no in between.
Absolutely. Awesome stuff. Bill, did you have something too? Just got to unmute.
Oh, no, I think the fact that a limited and dwindling supply is, you know, baked into the protocol is really one of the most compelling aspects. You metals guys know, you get the price of precious metals high enough, people start knocking it out of their teeth, but you cannot find price can't, you know, you all hear the stories about the guy who's going to try to recover the PC he accidentally threw out years ago because he thinks there's some Bitcoin. High price can motivate people, can get more supply, but if I know my Bitcoiners, they're pretty stubborn and they're pretty almost ideologically attached to this. You're going to have to get the price a lot higher to pry serious quantities of Bitcoin out of early holders.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, like, there's just no way I want to spend my Bitcoin. I mean, like, to me, each Bitcoin is worth like a yacht or a helicopter, like a house, $100,000+. And so there's no way I would ever sell, you know, any one of my Bitcoins below that. So Andy has something to say here too. Go ahead, Andy.
Right. And by the way, Simon, if I'm ever going to be in the All-Star game in the home run derby, I want you to be my pitcher, because you just give me such perfect softballs to smack out of the ballpark. Okay, now you have it exactly right. You got into Bitcoin to exit the banking system. Well, guess what, people? I got into gold to exit the banking system. And now I am getting into Bitcoin to exit gold. Yes, I still like gold, and I still own some, and I believe in it over the long term. But gold has been tainted by all these years of manipulation, by all of the fractional reserve that's gone on in the system. People on Wall Street are sick of it, just like you are sick of Wall Street. People on Wall Street are sick of gold, and it's a paper product right now. Yes, the physical market is only going to get tighter. In fact, gold supply is going to fall by 20% over the next decade because of what the cartel has done. So the price ain't going anywhere. And maybe when we do have a financial crisis, the price will go up. That's great, but it is no longer the safe haven of choice. Wall Street is sick of gold, and because Bitcoin is a better product. And that is going to be, you talk about, it not only is an uncorrelated asset, but it's the most growing asset in the world. And I think it's going to be the one that becomes the safe haven asset of everything. Yes, Bitcoin has saved me in so many ways, but mostly it's saved me from dealing with the torture of being in the gold market. Gold market is not fun. Bitcoin is fun. Bitcoin is exciting. Bitcoin is growing. Gold has stayed, and that's why Bitcoin is going to be the product that everyone on Wall Street and every retail person off of Wall Street needs to. In fact, I'll finish by saying I put out a tweet the other day. It got a lot of likes. I kind of know the kind of things people like, but it's true. I truly believe this. The reason to buy Bitcoin today is that 1 decade from now, every person, institution, and government will either need to own it or want to own it.
Yep, absolutely. Very great. You know, I mean, Bitcoin is becoming, as Jimmy Song likes to say, more and more anti-fragile. I mean, and with the price coming in, we have even more incentive to keep Bitcoin protected, to keep Bitcoin decentralized, to keep Bitcoin anti-fragile. So, of course, it also helps that the smartest people on the planet are pretty much working on this thing 24/7. There's a Scaling Bitcoin conference that went on over the weekend, and I highly encourage everybody to check out Scaling Bitcoin. They had the live. They had it live casted, so they have that on their YouTube. And I should put that link in the show notes. I didn't have that yet, but I'll do that. And it's just amazing to see all of these super smart, young, talented people just all working on crazy things, like sending Bitcoin through radio waves. I mean, just everything you can think of like this. The incentive is just so strong to evolve Bitcoin and to continue to add these amazing features and this amazing I can't even really have any more words.
Put this way, Vortex. Bill, how old is your son? Like 23 years old, right? Something like that. Incredible. If you're 23 years old on Wall Street, you know what your job is? You are like either getting coffee for the boss, or you're like an investment banking associate working 24 hours without sleep and getting no pay and getting treated like garbage. But when you're 23 years old and you're really smart in the Bitcoin community, you can actually create amazing things and become well respected around the world. It is, and again, you know, so many of the businesses of the world are mature, and so many, because of the centralization, have been abused and destroyed and over leveraged. This is naked, this is raw, this is brand new, and it's growing. And anyone from a millennial to a sub-millennial, I don't even know what that new generation is called, Generation Z or whatever it's called, has the opportunity to do well in life, whereas in these mature industries, there's almost no chance.
Absolutely. And I mean, look, you can be an app developer if you want and let Apple take 30% of your cut, or you can, you know, experiment with this new amazing crypto space and possibly become a very wealthy and very powerful person. So this, so thanks guys so much for tuning in, for giving us your thoughts. I really had a great time. The hour just kind of flew by here. So let me just ask you guys where we can find you. We'll start with Bill. Bill, do you want to give a shout out to anybody or anything that you're working on, or anybody that you know that's working on?
Oh, I got the easiest job in my family. You know, Jack's coding a Lightning Network wallet, and Brooks hosting meetups. I'm just managing my long position. I got that. I'm free riding on all the efforts of you guys. No, I don't have any projects. You know, obviously, if I get a chance to convince you, you know, take a look at, you know, Jack. You know Jack's product, but you already did that job for me. You already had him on there. No.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we definitely had Jack on last time, so I definitely encourage everybody to check out that episode. You can find that episode, of course, on the World Crypto Network, and we talked a lot about Lightning, and it was absolutely great. Had a great time on that. So thank you, Bill, so much for joining us, for giving us your time. We really appreciate it on this Sunday evening. Let's go with Simon. Simon, where can we find out more about you? Because, you know, everybody already knows who you are anyway, but please let us know, Simon.
Well, Vortex helped me debut for the very first time my lower third, so you can see my Twitter handle underneath. I've been meaning to do that for ages, so I can't tell you how many hangouts I've done without doing that, but I did it today. So thank you for that. Yeah, you know, I'm part of banktothefuture.com. We help accredited investors invest in the sector, and we're going through an incredible boom journey that we don't know what to do with at the moment. We're getting about 30 applications for investment a day, and we just had to expand our office out. Yeah, so you know, if you want to use that as an indicator, we used to know every single deal that was going on in the sector for investment. We're now getting 30 applications a day that our team just really can't keep up with at the moment. So we're trying to deal with those. But yeah, that's me. And you know, one final thought that I'd like to leave everyone with: sell your coins during SegWit 2x, because there probably will be some kind of correction and FUD. You will be giving them to Wall Street, because Wall Street's sucking them up right now and accumulating.
As Simon likes to say, we are in the accumulation stage right now, ladies and gentlemen. Corporations, governments, whether they're telling it to you or not, are accumulating Bitcoin. This thing is definitely going nowhere. And, you know, the price prediction, you know, people are asking for price predictions in the chat. I'll give you my price prediction after we outro Andy, but maybe Andy can give us his price prediction too. But it's always fun to make Bitcoin price predictions because nobody knows, and it's really amazing stuff. So Andy, please tell us where can we find out more about you? And if you have a price prediction, man, go ahead.
Well, first of all, Simon, exactly right. Simon said the exact same thing about when we had the Jamie Dimon and China thing about the accumulation phase, and people were just sitting on those prices, sitting at that $3,000 begging like Max Kaiser for the Bitcoin, and 3,500 and 4,000, 5,000, 6,000. And yes, because this SegWit 2x is absolutely nothing. It's going to have no impact on the most important part of Bitcoin, which is its store value function. As for me, CryptoGoldCentral.com. I've now been in business for 2 months, 2 glorious months. I posted maybe 450 separate articles. I mean, all day long. It's so much fun podcasting and writing. People just go on, get a free 7-day trial subscription. There's no strings attached. I'm not going to bug you. Take your credit card information. And of course, you can go to Andy_Hoffman_CG. Thanks so much for having me again.
Thanks so much, Andy, for being here. And thank you guys so much for being here. We really, really appreciated it. We had over 750, again, live viewers joining us. And it was just great. The chat was going by. We had some great discussion. And it's just been a great time. And, you know, really, this this show was put together because this episode was put together because we believe that, you know, the futures market and this stuff is really legitimizing Bitcoin, and the price is really going to go insane. My predictions are still after the correction between 5 and 6K by the end of the year, but absolutely going into 5 digits early next year. And I mean early January, February. And then when the ETFs come online, of course, we're probably going to end next year between 25 and 50K. So I mean, it really is going to be crazy. And of course, nobody can know, but this is my predictions, and this is pretty much what I'm sticking with right now. So it's we had a great and amazing time. I hope everybody hodls that Bitcoin hard. We really appreciate everybody here. And just a reminder, of course, we will be here yet again, as we are every Sunday, next Sunday at 12 p.m. Pacific. And, you know, one more final thought too, we do have an iTunes stream. We have an iTunes audio stream. We also have our audio on SoundCloud. So if you guys just want to listen to us in the car, please check out our iTunes stream, check out our SoundCloud stream. That's all available on worldcryptonetwork.com. So guys, thanks again so much for joining us, and we really appreciate it. Until next time, keep talking Bitcoin. We'll see you guys later.